All right, folks, what is going on? This is episode 364 of the First and Frame Rate Show. I am VF Baller. Over here, we talk about Georgia Southern and Atlanta Falcons football. And today, we're going to be talking about some Georgia Southern football. Looks like Georgia Southern is going to be on television a good bit this year, where either it's going to be on national television, local, or we all know that they're on ESPN Plus. So if this is really your first time, getting into Georgia Southern football or whatever the case may be, I'm not really sure. I try my best to push Georgia Southern football as much as possible. But if you're interested and it's your first time here, you're going to be able to watch Georgia Southern on various platforms. We're going to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about one game in particular that I think that Georgia Southern definitely has a really good chance in. But we're not going to do too much of the previews, but I want to let you guys know why I think this game is pretty significant for the Georgia Southern Eagles, not only the fact of where they're playing, but who they're playing against. So Georgia Southern getting good TV exposure is going to be really cool for 2022. I cannot wait to talk about this. Hopefully you guys hang around. If this is your first time here, welcome. Over here, like I said, we talk about Georgia Southern and Atlanta Falcons football. And Atlanta has been doing pretty good in the offseason. I think they did a pretty good job with the things they have been doing, moving and shaking within the offseason. And I think Georgia Southern has done pretty well too. I mean, you look at their spring game and all the recruits and the transfers coming in, it looks like Georgia Southern is on that path to actually make something happen. So let's go ahead and just talk about Georgia Southern and let's talk about what they're doing. Right now, Georgia Southern has pretty much revamped their entire team, if you haven't known already. They're not running an option anymore. It's going to be more of an air raid passing offense, and in the spring game, it looked pretty good. A couple more recruits have been committing throughout the 2022, 2023, and in some cases 2024, but it's going to be about what happens this season. Now, the spring game looked good. I was thoroughly impressed with what I saw. I was actually, surprised with a lot of things that I saw. And it gives me really good confidence that this team is going to be pretty decent. I think it's going to be a lot better than expected. And they're going to be able to show that off in a lot of different ways. The Eagles are going to be starting their home opener, which is going to be at Paulson. It's actually going to be at 6 p.m., which is really interesting that the game is going to be at 6 p.m. because, Paulson is a pretty good spot to be at night when football goes on. So Morgan State, they're going to have their hands full. So that's going to be pretty cool. And it's also going to be on ESPN 3. I'll have the link down in the description. The way you can find this information is on gseagles.com. But I'll definitely, put the link down so you guys can read this yourself. Also, the next week, they're going to Lincoln, Nebraska to play the Nebraska Cornhuskers. That game is going to be a night game, 7:30 p.m., 6:30 their time, which, they're in Central Time. That game is going to be on FS1. That's a really big deal. I don't think Georgia Southern's ever really been on FS1. They probably have. I just can't remember. But this is going to be really cool to see them on a different platform for the first time, if this is the first time. This is far back I can remember. But I'll get back to that game. The following week after that, they're going to be playing UAB on at 3:30, so it's going to be a afternoon game, and it's going to be showed on Stadium. If you don't know what Stadium is, if you have local TV or whatever, if you have the antenna hooked up to your television, non-cable, it may be on cable, but I'm not sure. But you normally will find Stadium on that avenue, so it's not hard to find. It's just you just have to look for it. And also the game that they have against the defending Sun Belt champs, the Louisiana Raging Cajuns, and I just call them UL sometimes, but they just won the baseball Sun Belt title. That's pretty awesome. Well, anyway, that game will be at 7:30, and we have to play them in Louisiana, so that's going to be a tough game because Louisiana has made a name for themselves in the Sun Belt, done a pretty good job of actually making noise within the Sun Belt. So not only, you have places like Georgia Southern, Appalachian State, even Coastal Carolina's been doing some things, but, even though Georgia Southern had a down year, we've been pretty prominent throughout the Sun Belt since we got here. Couple up and downs, but we nowhere near where Appalachian State has been doing. Appalachian State is pretty much where we should be. I feel like Appalachian State and Georgia Southern should be going back and forth for the Sun Belt title every other year, but all the coaching changes, all the different things that happened with Georgia Southern. So hopefully we'll get back to that with Coach Helton's coming in. But nevertheless, that game against Louisiana is going to be on ESPNU. Now, the rest of the games, Ball State, James Madison, South Alabama, Marshall, and Appalachian State. You notice they haven't even talked about Georgia State. Irrelevant. But nevertheless, all those other games will be announced at a later date. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I think Ball State may be on an ESPN platform outside of ESPN Plus. I can see that happening, not necessarily to be concrete or definite, but I can see that game. The games like Marshall and Appalachian State, those games will probably end up being on like ESPN2 or something, especially if both teams have a pretty good record. Especially the Appalachian State game. That game is in November 26th, and not much is going on at the end of the season like that. You have a lot of rivalry games, so around that, you don't have that much going on. So we may find a way to get that game in. Depends on what time of the day that game is played. If that game is played later on in the evening or whatever, we may find a way on one of those ESPN2s is possible. But I'm not really sure. If it's early in the day, I don't see it happening at all. But nevertheless, all these games are going to at least be on ESPN Plus. I mean, that's one thing I love about ESPN Plus. A lot of people have been saying a lot of things about ESPN and Disney and all this other stuff. I really, don't really care about all that stuff. Well, I ain't gonna say I don't care, because I don't want to go in the weeds of it. I don't want to say I don't care because I think it's a real serious topic. But I want my football. You know what I mean? So, I paid a fee to get ESPN Plus. I think it's a really good deal. Honestly, I don't know if it's going to go up or not, but that's something that I want. The company itself, they're going to have to deal with their own issues. But as far as me watching Georgia Southern football, it's one of the better convenient ways to go. I mean, it's a good deal. I recommend ESPN Plus, not only just for Georgia Southern football, but for all the other things that goes along with it. With that being said, let's talk about a few of these games. The Birmingham, Alabama game is going to be pretty cool because I feel like with us going to UAB and being played on stadium, I think that gives us a pretty decent exposure, especially in the region. Even for people in Alabama, and in the Birmingham area, and for us down here in the South Carolina and Georgia area, you'll be able to get a pretty good look at the team on that standpoint because some people may not have ESPN Plus, but for us that you can watch them on regular television, it's a pretty good deal. Also, obviously, the Louisiana game is going to be a big deal, November 10th. Ooh, excuse me. That's going to be a really big deal because Louisiana could easily be running away with the West. You just don't know. I mean, Louisiana has been doing pretty good in the Sun Belt Western Conference, so that could be a pretty big deal on that game. And it's going to be on ESPNU, so that's going to be a pretty big game. Especially, it's going to be a night game as well. I'm not too much worried about the Morgan State game anymore. Even though Gardner-Webb came into Georgia Southern and almost, gave us a run for our money, it wasn't a good look, but I don't think Morgan State's going to be able to do the same thing. So it's going to be good to watch the season opener. It's the season opener, so you're going to have a lot of eyes on that game. I would not be surprised you have a lot of people at that game. So that's going to be really cool to see. The game I don't want to worry about, I'm not, Appalachian State is Appalachian State. Playing against St. James Madison and Marshall is going to be, something serious. All the other games haven't really been talked about, like the Coastals, the Georgia State, and the Old Dominion game. They haven't said much about those. But the game I want to talk about is the Nebraska Cornhuskers game. And before I close, I'm going to talk about this extensively. So for the next 5 to 7, maybe 10 minutes, I'm going to be talking about this. So let's get into it. Georgia Southern is going to be going up to Lincoln, playing against Nebraska. Now, mind you, Nebraska had a 3-9 season last year. I've been looking all over the internet about looking into this team. Not too many people are confident about Nebraska at all as a football program right now. I think Scott Frost is having his issues or whatever the case may be, not necessarily to coach, but to coach up his team. This team has not been a very good team by Big Ten standards. I would not be surprised if this team does well because it is a Power 5 school. But based on what I'm looking at, this is not a situation where we're playing like a Arkansas. Because see, Arkansas, I thought we had a pretty good chance of Arkansas, but we all knew what the problem was against Arkansas. We really didn't have a quarterback to actually do anything with that team. We had opportunities even throughout the entire game. We was losing, but we just had nobody to distribute the ball properly. We don't have that issue now. And like I said, I don't think Nebraska is an Arkansas. So I'm not saying that we can go up there and we're going to win that game, but based on what I see, this team could be had. This could be a game that we can win. I'm not saying that we will. I'm not saying that it's in the bag, but I will say this. Based on what I see now, I mean, things could change. I'm giving us more than a 50% chance to win this game. And people are going to say differently because Georgia Southern is a smaller school and Nebraska is a more prominent name. But from what I see, I'm giving this about a 50 to 55% chance that we can win this game. I think we have I'm based on what I'm seeing and what people are saying about this team. I think we have a slightly, a slightly better team than Nebraska. And I know that's not really a popular move. People may look at me crazy for that, but I firmly believe what I see. Nebraska has talent. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's Nebraska. But you're looking at a team that's on the downside. And there's nobody out here that I've seen from the people that are running Nebraska's media, as far as people who do stuff like I do, to the national outlets that are talking about this team. You got some of the homers thinking this team could be 8-4. You got some of the other people that are outside of the homers are basically saying this could be another 3-9 season, maybe 6-6. That doesn't bode well for a team that looks like they want to play, a team that's been revamped. Look, one thing about Nebraska, they can't study this team for the option. LSU did that against us, and they had a really good game against us. You know what I mean? Ogeron already said they studied the option for months. Albeit they had Joe Burrow and all these other guys, who's going to beat that team? But nevertheless, they had something to prepare for. Nobody knows what this Eagles team is going to do. I mean, you can go back and look at the spring game and say, oh, that looks good. But trust me, I've been told from a reputable source that this team is this team only used maybe 10. I'll say at the most 20% of the playbook that they have at Georgia Southern this year. And you got a guy like Kyle Van Treese, who's a veteran quarterback who knows how to play up against, he's seen a lot. So whatever that Nebraska could bring to the table, I don't think it's going to be something that I don't think that is something that's going to really fool Kyle Van Treese. And with him and these running backs, if they could maintain the tempo and run the ball, we might have a really good chance at this. There's not one person that I've seen in Nebraska that was a standout player. I think they had one guy that transferred from Ohio State. It was a cornerback. I want to say that. So I'm looking at this like, wait a minute. We may have a good chance at this game. Tyreek Johnson. He transferred from Ohio State. That's the only name that I know that really stood out. And nobody else is talking about anybody else on this team. They have a lot of young guys on this team too. So this is what I'm telling you. Like, I'm not saying they got a lot of young guys and a lot of guys that are transferred from junior colleges and the FCS. Which that's not a bad thing. I'm not, that's one thing I'm never going to knock that because, Georgia Southern was an FCS team. And there's a lot of talent in the FCS team. There's some teams in the FCS that can beat some one AA or 1A schools. There could be some FBS teams. So that's nothing that I'm really tripping on as far as that goes. But we got a lot of guys that are coming into Georgia Southern that are ready to play. And I'm looking at what these guys have over here. I'm not saying that they're not talented because they got some pretty big receivers. But I'm looking at the roster now. They got about 3 or 4 receivers that's in the area between 6'3" and above. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They got some pretty tall receivers. I don't know what the quarterback situation looking like, but they got some pretty tall receivers. So I think we may have a pretty decent chance of this. I don't know. This is really, really early. But I think this is the game that really. I will say this before I did. I'm gonna wrap this up for real this time. This game being on FS1, this game playing against Nebraska, us showing up and showing out and playing tough at the least. At the least, if we play tough, it's going to put people on notice that Georgia Southern is doing something different. If we go in there and beat this team, then we're gonna have then people have no choice but to respect us. So this is why I think with all this good TV exposure that we have going on here, I really think that this game is the game that really could set things off. You know, even if we lose, I mean, the thing about it, even if we lose this game, we're good. Because the rest of the season isn't over, and we still got a chance to win the division and play in the title game. So it's good to get a team like this early and find ways to make things happen. You know, so that's all I got to say about that. I think that we're going to be watching a lot of Georgia Southern football this year, and I think with the Nebraska game, I think that's going to be a game that we could actually, have a shot in. And if we could do it on a national stage, we could be looking like some of these other teams that are in the Sun Belt that are beating Power 5 teams and making it look good at the same time. Now, I will say this, and I don't want to, beat our chest or anything. We did this when we was in the FCS, which was awesome, but it doesn't mean anything now. We're in the big boys league. We need to make something happen. Appalachian State does a very good job of competing and playing against Power 5 schools. I think with the change of direction that Georgia Southern is in, I think we can get that same type of success. Shout out to Coach Helton and the rest of the crew over there, the entire staff. So far, so good. They've been doing a pretty good job with this team. I can't wait to see what happens. If you like this podcast, hit the like button, share this podcast, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Let me know what you guys think, everybody. Let me know. Georgia Southern football getting good TV exposure. They're going to have some pretty good games on TV. Nebraska's, we're playing on FS1. I can't remember if we ever played on FS1. I want to go back and say, somebody probably said in the comment section, was the FAU game last year, was that on? No, I don't think that was an FS1. I don't know. I just can't remember. Nevertheless, let me know what you guys think about this. The schedule looking good. The link will be down in the description where you can see this post on gseagles.com about this the games that are announced and where they're going to be and what time. Let me know what you guys think. All right, y'all. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you guys moving up the charts for this podcast, making things happen. You guys are awesome. Can't do it without you. And thanks for the support. All right, y'all. I'm going to get up out of here. You guys enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. All right, y'all. Y'all be blessed. Peace.